Hi Nimaya, welcome to ASAP Art. Thanks so much for speaking with us today. So, Minnette de Silva was a pioneering female architect and one of the first Asian women to be elected an associate of the Royal Institute of British Architects. And you've been working towards setting up her archive. Can you give us a sense of the range of materials that are included within the archive and what they reveal about Minnette's life?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So we have this archive of Minnette de Silva's own personal collection, which was with her niece after her death in 1998. And the archive is by no means the entirety of Minnette's collection. There are a lot of glaring absences and missing material. But what we do have is a really amazing range of manuscripts of Minnette's writing and research. And we have manuscripts of her published autobiography, The Life and Work of an Asian Woman Architect, Volume 1. And we have all the kind of photography, the drawings, or photographs of drawings. From that she included in the book, correspondences, but we also have the material for her second volume that was never published, and that really details her career after 1960, because I think the almost mystery around Minnette de Silva is, did she have much of a career after 1960? What was she doing? And we really can see a lot of the work that she was doing that wasn't necessarily built projects, but teaching, writing books that never got published, but she'd done all of the research for it, going on field trips, visits to Iran, to Japan, to India, and photographing her, journey and the architecture of these places for her research. We also have, in addition to that, a few of her original drawings. I think when I said there were a lot of glaring kind of absences in the archive, it's that we haven't yet found her original architectural drawings from most of her work. But what is incredible is that she photographed all of these drawings for her book, but in a way now it becomes a really important reference point for us, because the drawings for an architect are the kind of cornerstone of their ideas and preserving their architectural philosophies or experiments, I would say. So we have that. We also have many correspondences between her and other architects, artists, an amazing collection of letters between her and her sister, Minnette de Silva, who was also a founding editor of MAG. She was an art historian in India and in Cambridge. And so there are all of these other people who are also becoming more prominent to us in our research through Minnette's archive. And in addition, we have an amazing collection of family photographs as well.
I was kind of curious to know about your process and how you came to work on this archive. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, sure. So I worked at MMCA Sri Lanka, the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art Sri Lanka. In 2022, I joined as a researcher on a cataloguing project. And during that time, the MMCA was developing an exhibition on one of Minnette's projects called the Watapulua Housing Scheme, which was one of the first housing schemes in Sri Lanka. It started in the late 1950s, and we were doing the research for this exhibition, and then I kind of joined in pretty late into this process. But when we were thinking about the design, looking for some of the archival material, which at that stage we didn't know that there was this collection of over 10,000 records that we're currently archiving, but we were, kind of making do with what we had, and also commissioning artists to respond to Minnette's life and do their own research. And I also worked on the kind of exhibition didactics at that time. So the exhibition was called 88 Acres, and it ran from 2023 November to I think July 2024. And I went for my master's after that, so I actually didn't see the exhibition opening. But once I had finished my master's, Shamini Pereira, who is the chief curator of MMCA Sri Lanka, asked me whether I would like to come back to MMCA to work on the archive project, because this, collection that we have now and that we are not owners of, but caretakers of at the moment, had kind of come to light, and we wanted to catalog and digitize and make this collection publicly available, and then also think about what we can do with this archive, how we can bring it to life, and also, insert Minnette de Silva's work back into a conversation, a critical conversation on a Sri Lankan art and architectural history. And so that's how I came to be involved as the project curator.
So Minnette was a pioneer in modern regionalism or critical regionalism, yet you've talked about the absences, and she is largely forgotten for the relatively recent past until like a rediscovery of Minnette's work. So I was wondering, this might also be a speculative question, but why do you think that happened, and what do you think led to this sort of rediscovery of her work?
Interesting. I think that when you say speculative question, I think it's really interesting to me, because I think working with an archive is always a bit speculative, and so you just get a few more pieces of the puzzle to put together and then answer some questions. So I'm definitely thinking, always speculating about Minnette's life. But to answer the question, I really think it was a combination of factors. So one of which is that Minnette worked in Kandy, and that is in the center hills of Sri Lanka, away from a lot of the kind of cosmopolitan center or center of activity in Sri Lanka, where a lot of architects were based. And she kind of was physically isolated from this community within Sri Lanka, but was very connected to an international community of modernist thinkers. So that's why we kind of always associate her with her connections to people who are working outside of Sri Lanka. So I think part of why she may have been forgotten is that in Sri Lanka she wasn't necessarily considered to be a prolific architect. But I would question whether she actually was forgotten, because, and this is not my own idea or analysis, but Anuradha Siddiqui, who has written a lot about Minnette de Silva, talks about this as well, that we claim that she's forgotten, but actually if you look at it since her death, periodically Minnette de Silva comes up in conversation, in books, in articles, exhibitions done, on her life or featuring her. So it's almost a misnomer that she was forgotten, but what I would say was maybe definitely overlooked was her contributions to architecture and writing and thinking around regional modernism. And I think she has been overshadowed by her own image as, this young, beautiful woman. And so we don't see her as the teacher in her 50s, or the writer in her 60s and 70s. And, I think that aspect of her work has been forgotten, which I think the archive hopefully will revive.
I also want to go back to what you said about Minnette being one of the founding members of Marg magazine along with her sister Anil. And there's obviously a connection to India. So I was sort of curious about that, if you could tell us a bit about this sort of transnational connection, and also the imagination of the regional as well as third world identity for countries during that period of decolonization, because this was at a moment where these countries were emerging as newly independent countries, and there was a vision for what that could mean or could be.
Yeah. So I think in terms of that imagination, Minnette and Anil were very much immersed in this type of thinking from their parents, because their father, George E. De Silva, was a politician in Sri Lanka, based in Kandy, who was involved in this kind of anti-colonial thinking and in the state building in the newly independent Ceylon. So I think that that's probably where their kind of thinking around a South Asian regional connection of independence and, you know, state building came from, and thinking about what that looks like, really understanding that moment and their place in it, and kind of trying to do work that spoke to that transition. In terms of their connections with India and with Marg, so Minnette actually first started her education in India. She started in the late 1930s. She came to Bombay in 1938. She worked with the architect Mistry, and who actually I think was the first person to introduce her to the Siam conference and, you know, the people around that. And then she went to the JJ School of Art and studied architecture until she was expelled in 1944 for protesting Mahatma Gandhi's arrest. And then worked with Otto Königsberger on the Tata project in 1944, very briefly, before she went to London and then continued her education at the Royal Institute of British Architects. So her, you know, connection with India really started at the beginning of her education and career. And I think that those connections really stayed with her because her modernist thinking really started here, right? And a modernist thinking that was very much rooted in a regional specificity and, you know, having to respond to what was happening politically, but also kind of aesthetically and culturally in the region. And I think then she really took that further in her work by experimenting with not just what does it mean to have a tropical modernism or a regional modernism, but what does it mean to have a modernist landscape that responds to the city of, or the town of Kandy or Colombo. And so kind of going even more granular and vernacular.
The MMCA, where you are a project curator, has organized many events to increase engagement with Minnette's Minnette's work, whether it's reading groups or workshops. So I was thinking, can you tell us a bit about how you imagine engaging with archives and activating them in the present, especially when dealing with public histories or working towards public histories?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've already started doing is speaking to people who knew Minnette and who'd worked with her in different capacities. So this has ranged from people who were her students, people who helped her with the book, people who helped fund her book, those who, knew her socially, or just even people who, had a very, very brief interactions with her, but that those interactions stayed with them. And so we're kind of, collecting these oral histories as well. And I think one of the ways we'd love to activate the archive is to start including these oral histories into the kind of programmatic activity that we're trying to, or we will do. And so that may be presented in many forms, that might be staged as conversations with these people, but also equally could become its own archive of the oral histories around Minnette de Silva. And I think what we started during 88 Acres was a series of lectures and talks with students of architecture, and I think we would love to continue to do that once the archive is up and ready. We've only catalogued less than 40% at the moment. We haven't even started digitizing yet, so we have a long way to go. But having students be a part of how they understand or interact with the archive will be a really, I think, key way for us to activate the archive, because that's what it's about, right? Having contemporary relevance. We're also thinking about workshops around things like documenting buildings and how to preserve architecture in different ways when buildings are under threat of being demolished or renovated, just a normal life cycle of a building. But what do we do with how do we preserve and record them, and record not just the building itself, but the stories within them.
Well, thank you so much. I just want to ask, is there anything else you want to add, or you feel that we missed out that you would like to share with us?
I could say that I think we have compartmentalized how we think of Minnette as this architect, writer, teacher, I argue photographic actor, designer of furniture and handloom, textiles. I think these categorizations are useful for us to understand how much she did, the range of her practice. Because if we look at one in isolation, it seems like she didn't do that much architecture, right? She didn't do that much writing, but the archive shows us how much these activities bled into each other and informed each other, and how she was thinking so laterally throughout her life, and always so focused on trying to build better environments. And I think thinking of her holistically is hopefully what this archive is going to be able to encourage people to do.